Assalamualaikum. My name is Arshad. I'm from Group 1. Today I'll be presenting to you the case study on SNC Lavalin and viewing it from an organizational behavior perspective. So first, introduction. This case study was made by Stephen McShane on SNC Lavalin Corporation, a corrupt Canadian company that was charged with bribery, fraud, and also attempts to smuggle the family of a former dictator into a safer country. So here's a list of crimes that they have done. Firstly, that they spent nearly 118 million Canadian dollars in bribes for contracts in Libya. They attempted to bribe Asian and African governments for contracts, calling their bribes as consultancy costs. And they have attempted to smuggle Gaddafi's family out of Libya and into Mexico to avoid them from being harmed in the coup that was ensuing within that country. Basically, this company was really shady and they did a lot of unethical things. So today we'll be looking into why and how exactly that those things were done from an organizational behavior perspective. So first question. Using the Mars model to discuss the main direct predictors of wrongdoing at SNC Lavalin. So there are 4 parts to the Mars model. There's motivation, ability, role perceptions, and situational factors. So firstly, motivation. So we identified 3 primary forms of motive. So the first, that there's a strong financial motive that employees and executives gain bonuses from the extra money that they're able to earn from the contracts that they get from bribery. Secondly, there's the occupational motive. That is that a lot of the employees and executives don't want to get demoted or fired, and they want to be promoted, and so they want to show that they gained a lot of money for the company. And lastly, there's also the cultural motive that highlights the company culture that sort of encourages these types of behavior from encourages the types of unethical behavior that exists. The second part of it is the ability. So in this specific case, the company shows very high capacity to commit these crimes, as they seem to be highly competent because they were extremely involved with Gaddafi's family, and there's a lot of and decades of bribery within Africa, and that were hidden under the radar, which shows a high level of competency and hence a high level of ability by these companies. Thirdly is the role perception. So in this case, SNC Lavalin employees understood that their task was to obtain lucrative deals at any cost. And secondly, SNC Lavalin employees also understood the financial significance of obtaining these lucrative deals. So in a sense, they're very clear on what their role is and the importance of their role. Lastly, on situational factors. There are 2 sort of factors that coerced or motivates people into doing this. A, the company culture within the company coerced people into committing these crimes through things such as peer pressure. And secondly, there is a lot of executive coercion that was reported by the employees, because it seems in the case study that the executives and the people who had decision-making power were using their power to coerce their employees into committing these unethical behaviors by firing, demoting, or ignoring those who did not partake in those unethical behaviors. So that's with the Mars model. The second question is how moral sensitivity and intensity applies to the unethical behavior among SNC Lavalin executives and other staff. So there are 2 parts. So moral sensitivity. Within this instance, the company's culture encouraged corrupt dealings, which did not draw the line on what is ethical and unethical, which means then that the company does not clearly distinguish what is right and wrong. So secondly, the company places financial gain above all else, meaning to say that it doesn't matter how ethical the behavior is, as long as it's able to get financial gain, which means then that the understanding of right and wrong within the company is heavily skewed to what is able to give them the highest amount of financial gain, which means to say that the moral sensitivity within the company itself is practically non-existent due to the culture. But secondly, the moral intensity of it. So, firstly, the executives that encouraged and coerced their employees into committing these unethical behaviors were quite detached from the consequences of their actions, as they were not directly involved with the dealings and the briberies, etc. The proof of this is firstly that the majority of the people who tried to speak out were discriminated within the company and were ousted from the company, which means that the people who were left are the ones who don't really care or have zero capacity to care about these corrupt dealings. And secondly, the company only took note of the illegal activities that were taking place and did not do anything further than a memo that was sent out by the company. So in that case, the moral intensity that was in this instance was very low. Moving on. The third question is, what steps should SNC, Lavalin and other companies in this situation take to minimize these types of corporate wrongdoing? So minimizing wrongdoing, there are three ways for you to do so. Firstly, there should be a strong enforcement of ethical conduct. That is, that the company should punish and clearly distinguish what is ethical and what is unethical. The thing and the significance of this is that it increases the moral sensitivity and intensity of its employees and executives by outlining what is ethical and what is unethical, and secondly, punishing those who do unethical behavior. Secondly, the companies should also establish a safe space for whistleblowers, because in SNC Lavalin's case, a lot of intimidation and discrimination occurred among the people who tried to speak out. And so this highlights the importance of companies to create a safe space and whistleblower protections for those who want to speak out against unethical behavior. Thirdly, there needs to be much better leadership, and there needs to be leadership through example. So in this case, leaders need to demonstrate what is ethical and what is unethical and use charismatic stances to win over employees, to encourage them to be more ethical. So lastly, Islamic perspectives and conclusion. So on the Islamic perspective, and SNCL company employees had moral sensitivity toward their illegal acts, which is bribery, fraud, and money laundering. Yet they still gave a preference to money over ethical workplace code of conduct. They left their personal values at the door and consistently violated ethical and legal principles daily because it was a norm. This is where their values lack moral intensity. This shows that the executives and the employees at NCTL did not have the integrity to hold themselves to the highest ethical standards and have strong, firm moral principles to stand against corruption that happened within their company. A Muslim is more accountable and responsible for his deeds in life and stands in integrity to preserve his life. With good self-integrity and responsibility, Muslims will accomplish their everyday tasks, thus being awarded a victory by him both in this world and the hereafter. Allah has mentioned in the Quran, save those who believe in righteous deeds, and they shall be rewarded without end. So that's why Muslims have greater accountability and self-responsibility. Secondly, about bribery, fraud, and money laundering. So the SNCL bribed or attempted to bribe government staff and leaders to win over contracts in Asia and Africa. The Holy Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam Muhammad says Allah's curse is on those who offers the bribe and on the judge who accepts it. So that means that there's a very strong moral imperative within Islam to avoid giving and accepting bribes. To move on to conclusion, there are a lot of lessons that we can take away from this case study. That we should always follow the rules and regulations and not to take any shortcuts to success. Secondly, to have our own principles and conscience in any kind of situation and to hold it firmly. Thirdly, top management and leadership should always hold accountability and to be held to account and responsibility towards employees' misconduct. Fourthly, the company should leave any culture that promotes bribery and corruption. So that concludes Group 1's presentation. Thank you so much for listening.